All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Agile Leaders, the skill mastery podcast where we help you develop skills to advance as a leader through insights from accomplished founders and operators. I'm your host, Evan Shai. Today, we are joined by my dear friend, Ellie Bahrmasel, founder and CEO of Further Faster, a product market fit studio, where she invests and advises early stage startups on de-risking execution and accelerating wins. Thank you so much for being here, Ellie.
Thanks so much for having me here, Evan. I'm so honored to join you for today's conversation.
Well, I'm excited for it. Let's go ahead and just set the stage, if you will, by just tell us a little bit about your journey overall, and maybe specifically what has led you to wanting to help these early stage founders and operators at the earliest stages of their venture.
Thanks for that question, Evan. I think it's so interesting to consider our stories when we look backward. We try and make it very linear, but life isn't linear. But I'll do my best to weave together how we arrived at today and why I'm so passionate about supporting the early stage venture ecosystem. I'm a recovering bureaucrat. I spent the first leg of my career in government and politics and did a brief stint in Fortune 50 working in corporate social responsibility, where my portfolio was focused on eradicating the digital divide. And in my experiences in these large bureaucratic institutions, and I want to be clear, large Fortune 50, Fortune 100s, they're bureaucratic in their own way. And as you imagine in large organizations, it can be really hard to turn the ship. Think of them as cargo ships. And I was constantly sitting with this awareness that we were designing policy, program, or products for people, not with people. And we were looking almost exclusively at quantitative data to make decisions, but quantitative data without the qualitative insight is an incomplete picture. We can say that a zip code is a food desert, but until we know what it means for the family of four who lives in that zip code, where both adults in the family are working two jobs, it's hard to design the right solution. And so these experiences led me to the awareness that what I was actually talking about was design thinking. And I realized that if large institutions are cargo ships that are hard to turn, startups are kayaks and canoes that you can maneuver in very agile ways. So I decided that I was going to get in these smaller ships that I could turn more rapidly and to do it with other people who wanted to power it, not just without those quantitative data points, but the qualitative as well. And that led to me advising and building startups with people, co-founding a civic tech startup. And in my last experiences as an advisor and a consultant on growth, where I was sitting at the nexus of product and sales, I realized that this continues to be an issue even in the canoes and the kayaks of the world. We're not always getting the right insight from the right people at the right time to make really mission-critical decisions about product and go-to-market. And the difference is that for many of these companies, the pool of capital and resource they have to build is much smaller. So that fuels me in helping more of these early-stage companies develop the tools and resources and connections they need to get the right insight for product market fit.
Super interesting. Design thinking specifically, what company were you at when you first were introduced by that concept and skill set?
So I owe everything to an outside source, not the company I was at in the moment, which is interesting, right? Like we often think that it's the organizations that we're at in the moment that are going to expose us to the skills and resources we need. But I was sitting inside of a Fortune 50 at the time, and I could feel something just gnawing at my soul that I don't have the complete picture. I don't have all of the tools and resources I need to do what I want. And I did a fellowship program called Starting Block. Starting Block is a global social innovation fellowship. It's a 5-day institute and then a community of over 4,000 innovators around the globe. And the 5-day institute I went to in Washington, D.C., almost a decade ago, one of the things that we were exposed to was design thinking. And we did really deep, intensive, multi-day learning and application of the frameworks and the skill sets. And just in those 5 days, seeing the profound impact it could have on being generative in our solutions, getting to the core of the problem that we're trying to solve, and unearthing different insights that we can't access without the right set of inquiry and discovery was groundbreaking and altered the entire trajectory of my life.
It's incredible. And yeah, I'm familiar a little bit, of course, with the work that you guys are doing at Further Faster. I think it'd be helpful for the audience to unpack that a little bit. I think there's some natural, obviously, through lines in terms of, design thinking as a foundation, but how ultimately that applies into your work. So can you just tell us a little bit about what the, average or normal kind of client interaction is for the Faster?
Yeah, at Further Faster, we're really immersing ourselves as a team in residence with early stage startups. Often we are meeting founders or co-founding teams at a very critical stage in the journey. They've usually raised a seed or a Series A round of capital, and they've got something that's out in market that is performing. They're getting some early insights, but they're trying to unlock the right insights to get to either true traction or to get from traction to growth. And we work with them embedded in their team as a fractional team that gets the product market fit flywheel spinning. And what we mean by that is we set a list of priorities that are ultimately the riskiest assumptions that someone's building for in the moment.
Sure.
And then we ask ourselves, how do we treat these risky assumptions as actual hypotheses that we can go test and test quickly? And we do that in a couple of different ways, but with the human that we're building for always at the center. So we get very clear on the user we're building for, the buyer who's involved in that decision if it's not the end user, the ecosystem of stakeholders in that universe. We go run tests with them. We run surveys, we do interview programs, we do diary studies and observational product interviews. And then we also bring business analysts to the table to look at what's happening in the broader market and competitive landscape, but also to get super granular on what's happening in the competitive landscape, getting as specific as how are our competitors using language in their go-to-market strategy. Where can we build something defensible? And that's the goal, is to get those insights all packaged in a way where we've got clarity on the unique defensible thing we can do, and then translating that into product, translating it into marketing and customer success so that the product market fit flywheel is revolving around those core insights.
Super, super interesting. When you think about you're touching a lot of aspects of the founder journey, the startup journey, a lot of skills that are naturally implied in doing that work effectively. What skills or experiences, for that matter, have enabled you to be able to be so impactful and influential for these startup companies?
I really believe that the best learning happens when we do. Totally. When we started Further Faster, we researched with 50 founders what their journey had been like and where the gaps were. And we heard that there's this gap between entrepreneurial theory and entrepreneurial practice, right? Much like, let's talk about the game of basketball. Evan, as you know, I'm a big basketball fan. Everyone's sick of hearing me talk about my basketball analogies. But you can listen to 1 million basketball podcasts. You can watch 100 hours of tape, but that's not going to make you the excellent MVP on a basketball team. It's being out on the court and getting rep after rep after rep after rep. And so we think about that and how we work because that's how we've learned. Sure. And for me, I read tons of books about design thinking, consumed all of these podcasts, read every book I could get my hands on about entrepreneurship, right? Watched every TED Talk. That wasn't going to make me the world-class entrepreneur, right? It was going to be getting out onto that court and shooting as many shots as I could, missing the net, having bricks against the board until I could perfect getting that ball into the net. And for us, and for me in particular, it's been getting those reps as a founder myself and working alongside other people who trusted me to be in their ventures alongside them. And I knew it wasn't going to be design thinking alone
Sure.
that would enable me to be impactful. So I took a look at what the skills were to be successful in the startup universe and asked myself, what are the ways that I can go learn by doing,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
I mean, it was often giving myself permission and finding the right partners to test these things out and actually get out there and do and try to be a little bit better every single day. Anyone who's ever gotten an email from you knows you're on 1% better every day. I always ask, could we try for 2% better? But it's that mindset that's brought me to my work and where I've gotten in my career.
That's helpful. I know you, like me, are a voracious reader, and certainly there's, a lot of utility in consuming things like books and podcasts and courses. I think one of the biggest things that has changed for me at this point in my career is relying less on some of those passive sources, at least as the sole mechanism to learn a new skill, and really having a bias towards like experiential learning and social learning, which I think you are also exceptional at. Is, once you've started to think about some of these things, you've been exposed to these new ideas. How do you start exchanging ideas and stress testing them with other minds out there? And I think that really accelerates clarity and understanding.
I totally agree that experiential learning is one of the greatest ways, and social learning are two of the greatest ways that we can create an exponential factor in the way that we learn, right? When you're doing this passive learning where we're consuming books, where we're consuming podcasts or TED Talks or documentaries, that is me in isolation, right? But the exponential unlock happens when we're in dialogue and community and testing and getting real-time feedback on what we're doing. Because me in my head alone, consuming content is static. It is not dynamic, right? But think about, for any gym enthusiasts, why do people love plyometrics, right? Like there's an explosive effect when you do something dynamic.
Yeah. I absolutely love that analogy. And I think it's something that it's one of your superpowers in terms of getting out there, exchanging ideas, building community, bringing really smart minds together to accelerate that entire process. Whether or not you recognize that as being one of your superpowers, I certainly believe it is. Are there any other skills that you think have been so impactful for the success you've experienced thus far in your career?
Well, I'm hardwired not to think about the successes. I'm always looking at the deltas. So I'm trying to be better about that. But that's actually part of what served me in my career and advancing is being able to look at not just what I'm doing well, but where are the deltas? Where are the opportunities for incremental change? Where can I learn more? Where could I improve the way I'm showing up? How could I do things differently? And I think cultivating the skill of self-reflection and compassionate honesty with yourself is really important, right? Like self-flagellation isn't going to be how we improve exponentially in our careers, but being able to compassionately look at ourselves and say, this is what you're doing really well, and also this is what I want to lovingly help you be better at.
Yeah.
And having that conversation with yourself leads, at least for myself, has led me to be able to look at where the areas of opportunity lie. So that has been a strength that I've cultivated over time. I also think a strength that I've tried to cultivate is being honest about what I don't know, and then looking at who knows what I don't know. And even if it's not my goal to be the best at something, I want to know enough to be dangerous. And then I want to ask, how can I be in right relationship with the people who know the things I don't know so that we can be better together? I think you've alluded to the fact that community is so core to who I am. And being better together is always the question that I ask myself.
I absolutely love that. I think self-awareness, and you've heard me say this before, but just accelerating the path of the truth, both in terms of exposing, even just for yourself, your own weaknesses or opportunities to grow. It allows you to just get on a journey to compensate or augment or mitigate any potential, weaknesses that you have, and build a really strong team that is complementary. I think that's so important. And I think to the extent you refuse to look honestly and objectively in your kind of self analysis or assessment, I think you're just delaying that opportunity for growth ultimately. Related to that, and to your point, I've always said, we spend a lot of time thinking about setting intentions and journaling about kind of the future. I have found that reflection and putting your day up for review is maybe 3 times as impactful, at least for me, as any type of journaling has been. So I really, the reflection piece, I think it certainly resonates with me. When you think about you've seen a lot of founders, you've worked with a lot of founders at this point. You've seen, what has been potentially drivers or catalysts of success, maybe what has impeded success or some of those wins, if you will. Can you share any skills that you think have been the most impactful on the success side of the equation for the founders that you've worked with?
I think when people ask about the recipe to success for being a founder, there's the hard skill component of this, which is super important. Being able to manage a P&L, knowing how to lead a team, knowing how to even build the right team in the first place, being able to sequence the right order of operations for how you build. That's all incredibly important. But when I've seen, if we strip away that hard skill component, which is important, but anyone can learn how to manage a P&L. What is infinitely harder is some of the, what gets branded as soft skills, though I don't love that headline because of the potency of these things that are soft skill, but it's a willingness to be wrong, ultimately, right? As a founder, you have got to move quickly and embrace the fact that you are going to be wrong more times than you are right, because it goes back to what I was saying previously about when we're consuming content, it's static. I'm in my own head. I'm not learning in real time and getting updated data from different sources that creates the exponential effect. The same is true for founders. If we build entirely from assumption, it's just me in my head. But that's not what leads to product adoption and growth. It's learning from the people who have the problem that you're trying to solve as a founder. The most successful founders I know understand that innately and are willing to be wrong and love being wrong. And it's like, please, sir, may I have another? And they're able to put their ego to the side in service of the mission. And then there's also this component around instinct. There's an incredible investor in my network who's been a mentor and an advisor to me. And he shared with me from his lens, he's looking for the people who've got this killer instinct. And when we unpack that a little bit more, it's this ability to not only be wrong, but eat, sleep, and breathe being wrong, right? You've got an awareness that there's a lot of data to learn, and you've got the ability to move quickly, right? So it's not just the willingness to be wrong, but speed, right? Speed is the name of the game. And so when you think about how you run as many drills as possible with your business, those founders outwork everyone around them. And I don't believe in hustle porn, right? That's not it. If you're only giving 8 hours, how do you make them the most impactful 8 hours, right? Because not everyone's 8 hours are the same. So how are you concentrating that oomph to your 8 hours? And it's being able to be wrong and be wrong really intelligently and apply everything you know and have the instinct around where my most impactful 8 hours are going to be.
I love that. YC, classically, I think distilled this pretty well. Your goal, what success ultimately looks like as a startup founder is building something that people want. And, you need to be trying to do everything you can to find out what it is that these customers want and need in order to either, solve or deal with some challenge, but ultimately be a compelling, solution for customers. And to the extent that you can have this instinct that allows you to really prioritize finding your path there, even when, and maybe even actively exposing when you're wrong, I think just accelerates the likelihood and probability of you finding what it is that people ultimately want,
1000%. I'm a native Chicagoan, and there's this great book about Chicago politics.
Okay.
And there's a line in Mike Royko's book where he famously quotes the first Mayor Daley, where he says, "We don't want nobody that nobody sent." And it's true about Chicago politics, but it's also true when it comes to product and companies. Who told you to build this? Who told you this is anything anybody wants? I have seen so many founders build things that nobody wants because they're operating from a place of ego. And so the most successful founders understand how to celebrate the death of ego, knowing that you're going to have a funeral for your ego on a daily basis.
What's interesting too is, I hear you emphasize it, a lot of just successful people we've had on the podcast. Certainly it's been, increasingly true as I reflect back on my career. We have this distinction between hard skills and soft skills and have this tendency to prioritize or establish a heavier weight to these hard skills. But, over and over again, when I hear successful people articulating what are the things that have helped them be so successful, they are these soft, or I would argue like durable skills that have applied across so many different aspects of their career. And you're talking things like communication, things like truth seeking or relentless pursuit of understanding, work ethic, right? Discipline. These are things that no matter what dimension you're talking about or what field you find yourself competing or basketball court, they are things that apply and are useful,
1000%. And I love the rebrand of soft skills are now known as durable skills. Like, this is a rebrand. It needs a fresh logo. It makes a ton of sense to me because ultimately businesses, right? We talk about businesses as if they aren't comprised of people.
Sure.
At the end of the day, businesses are organisms, and each person within that business is a cell. And the health of the cell contributes to the health of the organism, right? So each cell optimizing for its health is contagious to everyone and everything around them. And so if we can develop the right skills to be in right relationship with ourselves and in turn, the other people around us, that unlocks success for the whole enterprise.
I love that so much. I think as a leader, the last thing I'll say on this front is, at this point in my career, I see myself more of like a head coach of a basketball team or an NFL team. And my job is ultimately to assemble and develop the best possible team, then provide them the resources and guidance that they need to be successful, right? I think it really helps frame, the opportunity is to really, how do you invest in your people? How do you make goals and objectives as clear as humanly possible? And then ensuring that everyone has what they, need to be successful and to grow as individuals and as a team as well. I think critical to that, and I think you hit on that in a couple points that you just made, but how does feedback play in the overall skill development process, whether it be teams that you're working with, teams that are interacting with customers, or your own organization?
I always say thank you for the gift of feedback. I think it's so important for us to be able to review the tape at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with my sports analogies here, which I know
it's so appropriate.
It really is. I know people hate sports analogies, and we're trying to move away from them, but sometimes they're really appropriate because there's competition, right? In every industry. It doesn't matter if you've got a tech startup, a fashion line, a a paleta cart, right? There's competitive energy in everything we do because there is no shortage of people trying to solve problems in the market. And in order for us to be the best, the sharpest, the most competitive team in the marketplace, we need to welcome feedback. And it's about creating the right container for feedback and bringing the right intention to it. Unsolicited feedback is really hard, and you need to seek consent from people when you're in a relationship with them, even if it's you're the boss, right? And there's that expectation. I know, Evan, you and I have both had the privilege of sitting in the CEO seat, sitting in the C-suite multiple times over, and I think you get better and stronger each time because you're getting feedback, both direct and indirect, from the people you're responsible for leading. And in turn, we also have to give really thoughtful feedback that enables each person to shine. I love when you say that you think your job is to be the head coach, because I hold a similar view. If anyone has seen the Redeem Team documentary, Coach K does this artfully. Sorry for any of the Duke haters out there. Coach K does this really masterfully with the USA basketball team that he was responsible for leading. And we can have a team of all-stars and they still need feedback. And as a coach, we need the feedback. So how do we build the types of relationships that enable us to do that thoughtfully? I know that as a dear friend and colleague and mentor, I certainly see you as a mentor in my life. You've been able to give me thoughtful and hard feedback because we've set the right container in our relationship where I know the intention. You ask if you can give me feedback. You deliver it in a way that's constructive, that's about building me up, not tearing me down. And that's the way feedback needs to be delivered if I can say, thank you for the gift of feedback, because it's with the right intention and with the right framing. I seek it out proactively with every mentor in my life, with my colleagues. I give them a set of frameworks to help them give me the feedback in a way that I can receive it, but I'm always asking for it. I'm always looking for the delta, right? Like, I know what won, let's unpack it, but what I really need to know is where the delta is.
Super interesting. What are some of the frameworks that you use to guide, give permission, feedback that you're getting from mentors, if you will, in your network?
That's a delicate dance, right? Because you never want to tell people this is how you should talk to me.
Sure.
But at the same time, we are responsible for letting people know how to treat us. And that extends not just in our personal relationships, but in all of our relationships throughout life. We tell people how to treat us. And I always frame it as, this is how we can be most impactful together, right? Do I like my feedback in the moment, or do I like it afterwards? Do I want it written, or do I want it in a verbal communication? Am I comfortable with it in a big group setting, or do I prefer the one-on-one? And so being able to articulate those things and not just say, this is what I need, but asking, Evan, how do you like your feedback?
Yeah.
Here are some of the dimensions that I think about in terms of how I best can internalize your feedback. What are the dimensions that you think about and how you like to be on the receiving end so that you can best internalize it? Because then we're talking about the outcome. Feedback should be internalized and synthesized and then applied. We all want to strive for that outcome. Okay, well, what are the dimensions by which we should structure that feedback so you can achieve that outcome? And so it's a two-way dialogue, and it creates the opportunity for reflection. In many work environments, we don't get the permission to even consider that.
Sure.
Right? It's just like, you're going to get it however you get it.
Yeah.
And, being able to be in right relationship with each other is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes, look, communication can be challenging, in any scenario, particularly when it's sensitive subject matter. And I think what's often been helpful and super simple to understand, but is kind of doing what you had elucidated or articulated in the beginning of that response, where it's like, how do we first just like remind each other that we're trying to achieve the same thing, right? Like we have a shared definition of what like success ultimately looks like, or what an outcome ultimately that we're driving towards. We might have diverging opinions on how we go about getting there, but we're both trying to get there, right? It's not about you specifically. It's about my perspective of what allows us to get there faster. I think oftentimes that like takes out some of the heat and sensitivity of what the feedback ultimately is, that I've found to be, reasonably helpful.
There's a term for that exact thing that I had the privilege of learning from a really brilliant man by the name of Dr. Scott Sherman. He leads something called the Transformative Action Institute, and he has spent his life looking at what leads to major transformation at scale, what movements create real transformation at a societal level. And what you're talking about, he has headlined in the past as social Aikido, right? Rather than us coming at each other with adversarial energy, when someone's coming at you with that adversarial energy, how do you redirect it? So then we're looking in the same direction. It's not about me versus you. It's about us trying to accomplish that. Even if we don't agree necessarily on the final endpoint, even if we don't necessarily agree on the road that we should walk to get there,
Sure.
We're shifting that energy to say, like, let's be pointed at a North Star together. Then we can redirect the way in which this conversation unfolds.
I love it. That's Dr. Scott Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I will look it up. Him up. So very helpful. I want to be respectful of time. I know we're approaching the end of our session here. So before we do, you've had a ton of lived experience. You've been successful in a lot of different domains. You've seen what success looks like from the founders that you work with. Is there any advice that you would share with our audience, particularly those that maybe feel overwhelmed by the prospect of having to learn new skills while managing all of their current responsibilities?
There's two ways to look at a frontier when we're confronted with it. When we're confronted with the notion that we either need to learn a new skill or have potential consequence or adverse outcome from not learning the new skill, right? Because that's this moment that we're in. Even using the example of AI, but not getting rooted there. We're just at a new frontier as humanity. Their technology is moving at a pace that we have never seen before, and as human evolution occurs, there's two ways to be confronted with this moment. And one is from a place of fear and lack, and not just within ourselves, but being in this moment of, look at my calendar, where will this all fit in? I'm too overwhelmed. I've got too much on my plate. I don't have enough time. And that's a scarcity and a lack mindset. Mindset matters.
Sure.
If we can look at this moment where we're confronted with this idea of, I need to learn something new. Can it be, I want to learn something new? I'm excited to learn something new. We prioritize the things that bring us joy and excitement because it's the prize. It's the carrot. Can we see this opportunity to learn a new skill as the prize? The learning is the prize. The outcome on the other side of it is the prize. And can you make it something that you can do in community with other people? Because if we've got, even if we're not going on the learning journey together, but I've got some degree of social accountability with a peer, if I need to learn a new skill and I say, Evan, can you ask me about this in a month? And now I know I've got something to look forward to. Evan and I, he's guaranteed that we're going to have a conversation in a month. Great. Now I get to see my friend and talk about this joyful learning that I've been on. And maybe he's going to do the same back. I think if we can really see ourselves as pioneers who get to build something new, who get to learn something new, it fundamentally changes our relationship. It's not something to be afraid of, something to be excited about and to prioritize because it's going to make us feel good.
I could not agree more. I think that framing is so useful and even transformative if you can apply it to so many different aspects of your life. As usual, you have invaluable insight, an endless stream of golden nuggets and quotes. I would love to be able to have you on the podcast again sometime in the future. But until then, I'll be respectful of your time. I know how busy you are. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your infinite wisdom with our audience.
Thank you for having me. It's such a joy to be here with you and to be better together a little bit every day.
I love it.